Hey everybody, this is me, Undead Viking. Today, this is something I've been wanting to do for a while now, and I just haven't really found the time, and I haven't really felt the itch to do it, technically. But I am an RPG player. I play a lot of Dungeons & Dragons. I've also dallied with tons of other systems: Traveler, Earth Dawn, Shadowrun, MechWarrior, GURPS. I can go on and on. And the system that we play mostly is our own kind of homebrewed up old edition D&D that has some sprinkles of 3.5 and a little bit of Pathfinder thrown in. I'm a big believer in stripping mechanisms out of RPGs, and so the players can actually invest themselves in the story, and the GM can have the freedom to kind of create an epic moment, an epic journey, if you will. So I mean, that's kind of off in the distance, and I've talked about that in the past. And what I really like to do, and I'm hoping what I can create out of this one, is that I want to just kind of have these little RPG blogs kind of thing where I'm going to review some of the recent books I've been reading, some of the recent systems that I've been reading, and also just touch on some other topics as well. And I think I would in the future like to have, you know, kind of a bigger, longer discussion, if you will, about you know, heavy, crunchy systems like Pathfinder versus, you know, old school simplified systems as well, and kind of compare and contrast, and maybe invite you, the people that are listening, to invite into the discussion or what have you. But regardless, one of the things I want to talk about today, and the reason why I want to talk about it, is a couple things happen. I want to talk about the role of horror elements within systems, within game systems. Now, there are some systems out there that kind of base themselves in like a horror world. The old Chill game comes to mind, one that I really enjoyed a great deal. Of course, there is the absolute classic, and this is obviously a pretty old version of the book. I haven't picked up the new version. I need to find a copy of the new Call of Cthulhu version. This is I've had this probably, oh my gosh, for 15 years or so. Call of Cthulhu is a classic horror-based RPG that stood the test of time. It was created by Sandy Peterson. Man, I mean, that'd be like 40 years ago or so. When did this get... when did the first version... 1983 was when the first version was... So, yes. So, even more. Well, no, 40 years would be... So, 30. Anyway, regardless, it's been around for a long time. It's in a lot of people's minds. It is the gold standard when it comes to like a horror game, and so GURPS horror was actually a very, very good extension of that brand, of the GURPS brand. If you remember that from Steve Jackson Games, the generic universal role-playing system GURPS. That was something that came out when I was in like junior high, and so a long time ago now. And I remember there were lots of different GURPS settings because of the fact that you were able to plant, you know, whatever, you know, GURPS fantasy or GURPS horror or GURPS science fiction, or, you know, whatever, and you could plant them in the GURPS system. And the GURPS horror book was actually a very, very good book. It had talked about setting the mood for a horror game. It talked about how you have to like kind of put the players in that weird mystery, if you will, you know, like that they don't really know what's going on, the things man was not meant to know, that sort of thing. And you have to give them a very steady diet of unease and make them believe that, you know, one wrong step means that they're just going to fail, something that Call of Cthulhu always did really well. And I thought the GURPS horror, my old RPG books are packed away. I couldn't dig that one out. But I mean, if you can like find the PDF or something, really, really good resource, or whatever. But the whole reason why I'm talking about this, and I do apologize to those of you saying, well, like, when is he going to get to the point? But, you know, if you watch my videos, you know I kind of give you a little bit of background. But anyway, so when I came home from Gen Con, this was waiting for me. Paizo was kind enough to send me the Pathfinder, the Horror Adventures. Their version. I saw this was for sale at Gen Con, and I perused it a little bit, and I didn't pick it up, mostly because I'm not a big Pathfinder player anymore. If I was playing Pathfinder still, I definitely would have picked this up at Gen Con, and I would have had 2 copies, but thankfully I didn't do that. But, so you can kind of see in the front there's our classic heroes, and they're all like, you know, going at, you know, being sucked down by these undead zombies or what have you, and you know, obviously I don't remember. I mean, this is the bard, I'm sure, and that's the paladin, I think, and maybe I think that's the cleric, if I remember correctly. I don't remember their names. Somebody who plays a lot of Pathfinder probably knows those answers, but I always find it difficult to buy into a established system trying to add a horror element to the game. Now, I'm not going to do a full review of this. You can definitely like go to your local game store. You can read online. I'm sure lots of people have done it. This is if you are a Pathfinder fan, this is an excellent resource. This is an amazing resource for you. It has tons of new rules on how to handle horror, tons of new rules on how to handle fear. It has some wonderful templates for making some super, super awesome, cool, you know, bad guys that they're going to deal with. There's a big giant list of really, really evil and cursed magic items, and some of those I'm going to steal. I'm totally going to steal. You know, so like they have rules for these like waxwork creatures or whatever. And so, I mean, if you're a fan of Pathfinder and you want to add a horror element to your game, you know, this does do that very well. Now, my problem with a horror system being put into an established game like Pathfinder is that it inherently Pathfinder is just not going to work really well, in my opinion. Pathfinder, and this I'm going to touch briefly on this, and this is something I'd love to talk about at some point as well. Pathfinder is a wonderful system that kind of breaks when everybody gets to like 7th or 8th level. At that point, your power gamers have just min-maxed themselves out. Your wizards are starting to get into that weird role or weird moment where, you know, they're altering reality at unfathomable levels. Your clerics are, you know, able to like, they're starting to be able to have like bringing people back from the breath of life, and they hit 9th, obviously they get raised dead and things like that. And so you kind of run out of things that scare PCs. I mean, they have escape routes. They have things like Dimension Door. They have magic items that allow them to turn invisible or fly or levitate, or, you know, just they run out of things that challenge them. They run out of things that actually are going to scare them. You know, it's one of the things that I don't like. I never like looking over, you know, my DM screen, and this isn't a DM screen, but there's nothing when I'm describing, you know, like you see the tunnel of, you know, like the foul odor emits from the, you know, the cave as it descends, you know, deeper into the madness that is the labyrinthine curbs, and, you know, so I'm trying to get all this like flavor and everything like that, and they're like, let's go, we can teleport out if it gets bad, let's do this, you know, and you're just kind of like, ugh. It's like there's nothing really to scare them. And I mean, admittedly, yes, there are things, there are creatures, there are traps or anything like that, but you then run the risk of having a situation where, you know, it's not, you know, their fault technically. You know, they're not really biting off more they can chew. They're just running into something that is, you know, just almost purposely put there by the DM to, you know, just stymie them at that moment, you know, and then you run the risk of like, oh, okay, well, you just wanted us to lose, you know, and so I have issues. I mostly run games. I've been running this one campaign, this D&D campaign now for about 2 years, a little almost 3, and it's wrapping up. You know, it's like we're at that point where we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I've kind of taken them on the journey where I'm getting that itch to play again and not be in charge of the entire thing. So but the problem is that like it's tough to maintain that feeling of dread, that feeling of being up against it. That feeling of like, if you go into that dungeon, you might not come out alive. And so now you have these rules in here for insanity and all these things, that all the things that are treasured and wonderful that you find in games like Call of Cthulhu. But for Pathfinder, it just doesn't have the same gravity for me. You know, it's difficult to be scared of, you know, like a big giant monster when you've got a +3 sword in your hand. You got a guy that can throw fire from his fingertips behind you. You know, it's just, you're kind of, you know, and then you run into a situation where if you do, like, oh, you swing your sword and it passes right through the horrible thing from the outer unknowns, and then the wizard casts the fireball and it just, you know, like explodes on it and does nothing. That's when, like, the players are like, they cry foul, and they're like, what did you expect us to do? And you're like, well, it's more atmosphere and everything. You can't, I hope you understand, you can't just bridge those things together. Now, maybe you can, I don't know, but maybe it's just my curmudgeon attitude towards the Pathfinder system that is preventing me from enjoying this aspect. But, so, dovetailing all of that kind of down to my whole point, well, not my whole point, I wanted to talk about the other stuff that I talked about before, but the one thing I really want to talk about right now is that when I was walking around in Gen Con, I happened upon a booth, and my wife actually pointed out this booth to me, and I had heard of this game system before. Somebody had mentioned it to me, and like you know, it's just one of those things where in passing they mentioned an RPG system to me. And I'm always on the lookout for RPG systems. Mostly I just really like reading them. I like, my friend Craig, really, really good friend Craig, he says that, like, a good RPG like is compartmented in such a way that it allows me to take what I want out of it, what I want to use, and allows me to pass on the stuff that I don't want to use. And most of my really, really good ideas when it comes to being a DM and running my story and what have you is because I've stolen tons of ideas and tons of things from other RPG systems, other things like the magic items in this book, things like that, like, and then it just enhances the game because, you know, after a while, you just can't really come up with anything new. You know, it is a little difficult. So, anyway, so my wife spotted this, and this is just one of the many books of this system. So this is called Shadows of Esteren, and Shadows, and from the get-go, bam. Okay, so just compare the differences. Okay, and admittedly, this isn't exactly fair because of the fact that one is Pathfinder and has an established look, it has an established artist and things like that that we're coming to expect. But here we have this, and do you feel, I don't feel any horror in this situation. I feel like this is just 3 adventurers fighting a bunch of undead. Maybe they'll lose, I don't know, but I mean, I'm just waiting for the cleric to just start turning undead over and over again until they finally destroy all those things. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know, I don't feel any inner dread at all from this situation. Now, look at, and you can find these pictures online, you can look at them probably closer than this video, but you look at the cover of Shadows at Esteren, and what do you see? You see it's bleak, and it's gray, and what is that thing? What is that weird monolith that is just sitting there that, like, is it, you know, and you kind of stare at it along, and it's like, well, it's kind of a face, I don't know, it's like a modeled face, it's like mutated, there's that crow just sitting there, not caring at all, like it's obviously evil or something, there's like a bunch of cobwebs and like some creepy skulls that are just like on there, and it's just, you look at this, and even like the trees and the clouds and everything, it just seems like this is some weird, horrible alien portal or location that just isn't supposed to exist. And I love this. I love the picture of this. I just love everything about this. And from the get-go, when I first saw it, I just was said, I went up and I talked to both the writer, the designer of the game, and also a gentleman by the name of Michael, I talked to them about the whole system. And this is a thing that went through Kickstarter recently, and I, of course, missed out on it. I missed out on tons of cool stuff in Kickstarter. But they had this amazing Kickstarter with all of these books, all of these source books and everything like that. And they had everything for sale at Gen Con. And because it's me, of course, I picked up the giant bundle that had every single book, every single resource, every single thing, the art prints, the music, everything like that. Because I was just sold. Immediately when I saw this, I said, I've got to have this. And so over the last few days, I have, this has been my nightly reading. I get ready to go to bed, I crawl into bed, and I've just started reading, this information and all these things about the Shadows of Esteren and the background to the world and everything else. And it is a twisted, bleak, and horrible world where basically there really isn't. Yes, it is still fantasy. But, and I hate to say this because it isn't really Game of Thrones, but it's like Game of Thrones fantasy. Yes, there are some fantasy elements to the world, but they're not pronounced. It's just people in like a medieval setting that are forced to face just like a horrific gothic horror. And so it combines two things. It combines the ability to tell a wonderful story, a very evocative, dangerous, evil, awful story of like this world that like just like where the fabric between reality and like horrific things is fraying, and it's they're starting to bleed together, and the players are kind of forced to be in that situation, not really knowing what they're facing, not really knowing what they're fighting, but knowing that there's something out there, something that's a bigger evil than just like your common man that's walking next to you. And it is a fantastic system. I plan on doing a much longer, more in-depth review of this, but this, in my mind, is how you do fantasy, like medieval, like D&D horror right. You can't make people feel scared in Pathfinder, but just looking at this picture, looking at the things that are inside this, if you go ahead and dig into the game system and everything like that, I mean, it's just like every single picture in here, like I'm just going to find a couple, it just, nothing, there's nothing like, like, this is like the most color you'll ever see. And even that looks bleak. Somebody sitting there staring out at the plains, this weird, crazy city off in the distance, maybe some green fields there, but this bleak, it's rainy, it's a marsh, there's just, nothing there that makes you feel like there's any shot. I mean, just things like this, just like wonderful moments or whatever. And I wish I had the picture, and I can probably find it. Maybe I can post it like in the video here. But one of the pictures that really, really struck me was that there was this image of like basically this long, this big giant mountains, like just gray mountains, like just wintry, blizzardy mountains. And as they came down, there was just endless evergreen forest covered in snow. Just made it look, the whole thing just looked cold and dark and sinister. And then there was this little path, like the big giant forest, and this tiny path that led into that forest. And you can see there are like this group of small band of adventurers, like 4 adventurers, and they're beginning to walk into that path of that giant bleak forest. And you just know the end of that story is, and they were never heard from again. It's one of those things where I saw that, and you just feel dread, and you feel the power of the story before you actually even get into the story, if you will. So, this is, I mean, like I said, I want to do a bigger, longer review of Shadows of Esteren. It's got a fantastic storyline. It's got a fantastic world. It presents itself like the first like portion of the book. It tells itself tells the story of the world from like the viewpoint of a scholar, kind of like just talking and explaining what it is he's seeing, what it is he's doing, and it's fantastically written up and down. and the, you know, obviously as far as like the creation of the book and like the quality of the book is superb. So I mean, there's really nothing as far as that is concerned that you have to worry about. But if you are interested in a horror system, I would strongly suggest you take a look at this, and hopefully in the next like 2 or 3 weeks after I get this fully read, I'll be able to kind of dive in and give you a longer, fuller review of it. So there you go. If you have any questions or anything you want to say about horror in RPGs, great. This, as I said, I want to be able to do like 1 or 2 of these RPG kind of blogs, if you will, a month, you know, when I have like an itch to scratch. I'm thinking maybe next time I'm going to talk a little bit about superhero RPGs and stuff and thing of that. I mean, that's don't quote me on that. That's my idea that I'm gonna address. So if you have any suggestions as far as anything, any RPGs or like a focus you'd like me to talk about, please let me know, and I'll try to do that. So thank you for taking the time. I realize this kind of went a little bit long, but I hope you enjoyed me waxing a little bit about the RPG experience. And if you have any comments or questions or whatever, just ask away, and I'll be happy to answer those as best as I can. All right, you take care of yourself now. All right.